The metal walls of the prison transport ship hummed with a cold, steady vibration. Captain Juan pressed his back against the wall and stared at the small window that showed nothing but empty space. Stars moved slowly past the thick glass, each one growing smaller as the ship carried him further from everything he had ever known. His hands were not chained. There was no need for that now. Where he was going, there would be no escape. No rescue, no second chances. The door to his cell slid open with a soft hiss. A tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms stepped inside. This was Commander Vex, the one who had read his sentence 3 days ago. The alien's voice was smooth and cold when he spoke. "We will arrive at Void Station Omega-7 in 2 hours, Captain Juan. I thought you might want to know." Juan looked up at the alien but said nothing. What was there to say? He had heard this speech before. "You still do not understand what you have done," Vex continued. "Your actions at Kepler 442 were not heroic. They were dangerous. They put the entire Galactic Council at risk." "I saved 37 people," Juan said quietly. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. 37 human lives. And in doing so, you ignored direct orders from the Council. You made an enemy of the Rakti pirates. You caused a diplomatic crisis that took months to resolve. Vex's 4 arms moved as he spoke, a sign of anger in his species. "This is why humans are so difficult to work with. You think with your emotions instead of logic." Juan stood up slowly. Even though Vex was taller, the human did not back down. Those 37 people had families. They had children waiting for them to come home. They had lives worth living. And now, because of your choice, trade agreements with 3 systems have been damaged. Mining rights worth billions of credits have been lost. Was it worth it, Captain? "Yes," Juan said without hesitation. "It was worth it." Vex stared at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "This is exactly why you must be removed from service. Humans like you are too dangerous to keep in positions of command. Your species thinks that individual lives matter more than the greater good." "Maybe that is what makes us human," Juan replied. The alien commander turned to leave then. Stopped at the door. "The station you are being sent to is not meant to be survived, Captain. It is a place where the Council sends those who cannot be reformed. The life support will keep you alive for 6 months, maybe 7 if you are careful. After that... He paused. "After that, you will have time to think about whether those 37 lives were truly worth your own." The door closed with a final hiss, leaving Juan alone again. He sat back down and closed his eyes, remembering that day at Kepler 442. It had started as a simple escort mission. 3 human research ships were studying a new solar system, looking for planets that could be colonized. Juan's ship, the Morning Star, was there to protect them. The attack came without warning. Rakti pirates dropped out of hyperspace in stolen warships surrounding the research convoy. The human ships were not built for fighting. They were slow, heavy, and filled with scientists instead of soldiers. The Galactic Council's orders came immediately through the emergency channel. "All military vessels retreat immediately. Do not engage." This is a direct command from the High Council. But Juan could see the research ships on his screen. He could hear the voices of the people inside. Them calling for help on the radio. Dr. Kim was on the lead ship with her team of 12. Engineer Park was on another with 15 people under his command. The 3rd ship held 10 more humans, including 2 families with young children. The pirates were closing in. In minutes, all 3 ships would be captured or destroyed. Juan had looked at his own crew. 25 good people who trusted him to make the right choice. His first officer, Lieutenant Sue, had been watching him carefully. "Captain," she had said quietly, "the Council orders are clear. We have to leave now." Juan had stared at the screen for 3 more seconds. 3 seconds that would change his entire life. No, he had said, we are not leaving them behind. The battle that followed was brief but deadly. The Morning Star was a small military vessel, fast and well armed. Juan and his crew fought like demons, striking fast and hard at the pirate ships. They managed to disable 2 of the enemy vessels and drive the others away. All 37 civilians were saved. Not one of them was hurt, but the cost was high. The Ratti pirates were not just criminals. They were part of a larger organization that had connections to several powerful alien governments. By attacking them, Juan had caused what the Council called an interspecies incident. The political aftermath was a nightmare. Trade negotiations fell apart. Military alliances were questioned. 3 alien governments demanded that the human who had attacked their business partners be punished. The Galactic Council's solution was simple. Captain Juan would be removed from service and exiled to a place where he could never cause problems again. Now, as the transport ship carried him toward his prison, Juan thought about those 37 people Dr. Kim had sent him. A message before he was arrested. She had thanked him for saving her team and told him that her research might help find new worlds for humanity to settle. Engineer Park had written to say that his daughter had been born just 1 month after the rescue, and he had named her Juan. In honor of the captain who saved her father's life, did he regret his choice? No, he would make the same decision again, even knowing the cost. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the small window, Juan could see a new star, red and dying. Near it, barely visible against the darkness, was a twisted structure of metal and glass. Void Station Omega-7, his new home. His final home. The transport ship moved closer, and Juan got his first clear look at the station. It was huge, much larger than he had expected. Old research equipment stuck out from its sides like metal bones. Dark windows reflected the red light of the dying star. This was where the Galactic Council sent people to die alone. But as Juan stared at the station, he felt something strange. Not fear, exactly, not sadness, something else. Something that felt almost like curiosity. The station looked abandoned, but it did not look empty. In the shadows between its metal structures, in the darkness behind its windows, something seemed to be waiting. Juan did not know it yet, but he was about to discover that he would not be alone after all. The airlock sealed behind Juan with a sound like a tomb closing. The transport ship was already moving away, leaving him alone on Void Station Omega-7. Emergency lights cast long shadows down the empty corridor ahead of him. The air smelled old and metallic, like a machine that had been running too long without maintenance. Juan picked up the single bag that contained all his possessions now. A few clothes, some personal items, and a datapad with technical manuals. Everything else had been taken away when they arrested him. His footsteps echoed as he walked down the main corridor. The station was much bigger on the inside than it had looked from the transport ship. Hallways branched off in every direction, leading to laboratories, living quarters, and rooms filled with equipment he did not recognize. According to the files he had been given, Void Station Omega-7 had been a research facility run by multiple alien species. Scientists from 12 different worlds had worked here, studying things that the files called consciousness research and quantum awareness experiments. The project had been shut down 20 years ago after what the reports called an incident. The files did not say what kind of incident. Juan found his assigned living area in Section C. It was small but comfortable, with a bed, a desk, a small kitchen area, and a bathroom. The walls were covered with control panels and screens, most of them dark. A large window looked out at the red star that the station orbited. He set his bag down and walked to the window. The star was old and dying, its surface covered with dark spots and flares. In a few million years, it would expand and swallow everything in this system. But that would be long after his food ran out. The automated systems had given him 6 months of food and water. The life support would run for much longer, powered by the energy from the dying star. He would have air to breathe and gravity to keep his feet on the floor, but nothing to eat. It was a slow death sentence, designed to give him time to think about what he had done. Juan spent the first day exploring his new home. The station had 12 main sections, each one built by a different alien species. The Vaxi had built the central hub with its flowing, organic curves. The Corral had added the industrial sections with their sharp angles and efficient design. Humans had contributed the living areas, making them comfortable and warm. Most of the equipment was still working, but many of the computers were locked or damaged. Juan could access basic life support and communications, but the research files were sealed. Whatever had happened here 20 years ago, someone did not want anyone to know about it. On the second day, something strange happened. Juan was in the main laboratory, trying to understand what kind of research had been done here, when the light started to flicker. Not randomly, but in a pattern. 3 short flashes, 3 long ones, 3 short ones again. He knew that pattern. It was an old Earth distress signal, something that humans had used centuries ago when they were still trapped on one planet. But that was impossible. The station's main computer was offline, and there was no one else here to send signals. Juan checked all the technical systems he could access. Power levels were normal. There were no faults in the lighting circuits. According to every diagnostic he could run, the light should not be flickering at all. The pattern repeated every few minutes for the rest of the day. On the third day, it got worse. Juan woke up to find that someone had been in his room during the night. Nothing was missing, but his belongings had been moved. His datapad was open to a page he had not been reading. His clothes were folded differently than he had left them. The coffee maker in his kitchen was running, even though he had not turned it on. In the laboratory, equipment that had been broken for 20 years was now working perfectly. Screens that had been dark were now showing data streams in languages he did not recognize. A translation computer that should have needed hours to power up was already running. Someone or something was trying to communicate with him. That evening, Juan decided to try an experiment. He went to the main laboratory and spoke to the empty room. "Hello," he said. "If someone is here, I would like to talk to you." The lights flickered once. "Can you understand me?" 2 flickers. "Are you the reason this equipment is turning on?" 3 flickers. Juan sat down in a chair and thought about this. Whatever was happening, it was not following normal rules. The station's AI had been shut down decades ago. There were no other people here. But something was clearly responding to him. "Are you alive?" he asked. The lights went out completely. For a moment, the laboratory was in total darkness. Then they came back on, brighter than before. "I will take that as a yes," Juan said. Over the next few days, he learned to communicate with whatever shared the station with him. 1 flash meant yes, 2 flashes meant no. 3 flashes meant uncertainty or confusion. Sometimes the lights would flicker in complex patterns that seemed almost like a language, but one he could not understand. The presence, whatever it was, seemed curious about him. Equipment would turn on when he entered a room, as if something wanted to watch him work. Doors would open before he reached them. The food synthesizer started producing meals that were exactly what he wanted to eat, even though he had not programmed it. Most unsettling of all were the shadows in the corners of rooms. In the spaces between pieces of equipment, the darkness seemed to move and shift. It was subtle, something that could easily be explained as tricks of the light. But Juan began to feel like he was being watched, studied, perhaps even protected. On the 7th day, while he was eating dinner in his quarters, Juan spoke to the darkness directly. "I do not know what you are," he said, "but I want you to know something. I am not afraid of you. I have been sentenced to die here, so I have nothing left to lose. If you want to hurt me, go ahead. If you want to help me, I would appreciate it. If you just want to watch me, that is fine too. I have been alone for a week now, and I would not mind having some company, even if you are not human. The lights flickered once. Yes. That night, for the first time since arriving at the station, Juan slept peacefully. He dreamed of shadows that moved like friends and darkness that felt warm, instead of cold. He was beginning to understand that he was not alone after all. 2 weeks had passed since Juan first noticed the lights flickering in patterns. He had settled into a routine of sorts, exploring different sections of the station during the day and talking to the presence in the evenings. The conversations were simple, limited to yes and no answers, but they were better than complete silence. On this morning, something was different. Juan woke up feeling like someone had been standing next to his bed all night. The sensation was so strong that he checked his room twice, but found nothing. In the kitchen, his coffee was already made, still hot and perfectly prepared. On his desk, the data pad was displaying a schematic he had never seen before. It showed the station's power systems, but with modifications that should not have been possible. Energy was being routed through sections that had been abandoned for decades. New connections had been made between systems that were never designed to work together. What are you showing me? Juan asked the empty room. The lights flickered 3 times. Uncertainty. He studied the schematic more carefully. The modifications were not random. Someone had been upgrading the station systems, making them more efficient, more powerful. The consciousness research labs that had been offline for 20 years were now receiving power again. Juan decided to investigate. The research section was in the deepest part of the station, near the core where the gravity generators were located. He had avoided this area before because most of the doors were sealed, but now they opened easily as he approached. The laboratories here were different from the rest of the station. The walls were covered with strange symbols that seemed to shift when he was not looking directly at them. Equipment filled the rooms, devices that looked like they belonged in a dozen different alien technologies, all connected together. In the center of the main lab was a chair surrounded by sensors and neural interface equipment. This was where the consciousness research had been conducted, where scientists had tried to study the nature of thought and awareness itself. As Juan examined the equipment, he began to understand what had happened here 20 years ago. The researchers had not just been studying consciousness. They had been trying to communicate with forms of awareness that existed outside normal space and time, and they had succeeded. You were here during the research project, were not you? Juan asked the empty lab. One flash. Yes. The scientists found. You? One flash. What happened to them? The lights went dark for almost a minute. When they came back on, they flickered in a complex pattern that seemed full of sadness. Juan was still trying to understand the pattern when something touched his mind. It was not a physical touch. It felt like a cold finger pressing against his thoughts, but from the inside. For a moment, he panicked, trying to pull away from the contact. But then he realized that whatever was touching his mind was not trying to hurt him. It was trying to talk to him. Images flooded into his head. Not pictures, exactly, but concepts and emotions that his brain translated into things he could understand. Loneliness. Vast, terrible loneliness that stretched across millions of years. Curiosity. A desperate need to understand these small, brief creatures that appeared and disappeared so quickly. Fear. The researchers had been afraid when they first made contact. Most of them had run away. Sadness. Those who stayed had tried to study the presence like it was just another form of energy or matter. They had not understood that it was truly alive, truly aware. Anger. The research project had been shut down when some of the scientists started acting strangely. The authorities had decided that the presence was dangerous. Abandonment. Everyone had left, leaving the presence alone again after briefly experiencing what it was like to have company. The images stopped, and Juan found himself sitting on the floor, breathing heavily. His head hurt, but not in a bad way. It felt like he had been trying to understand too much information at once. "You are lonely," he said to the darkness around him. "One flash, yes. You have been alone for a very long time. One flash. The researchers were afraid of you because they did not understand what you were." One flash. Juan stood up and looked around the laboratory. Now he understood why the equipment had been turning on, why the lights had been flickering, why he felt like he was being watched. The presence was not trying to scare him or control him. It just wanted someone to talk to. "What are you?" he asked. "I mean, what kind of being are you?" The touch came to his mind again, gentler this time. More images flowed through his thoughts. Darkness between stars. The empty spaces where matter was thin and energy barely existed. A consciousness that had formed in the quantum foam of space itself. Awareness emerging from the collision of particles that existed for only fractions of seconds. Eternity. Watching stars be born and die. Seeing civilizations rise and fall. Observing the universe change over billions of years while remaining essentially alone. The presence existed in the spaces between things. Between matter and energy. Between thought and reality. Between life and death. It had no body because it did not need one. It had no voice because it had never had anyone to talk to. It had no name because there had never been anyone to call it anything. "You need a name," Juan said. "I cannot keep thinking of you as the presence, or whatever you are." The lights flickered curiously. "How about silence? You exist in the quiet spaces between everything else." The lights flashed once, brighter than usual. "The presence liked that name, silence," Juan said, testing how it sounded. "I am Juan. It is good to meet you, even if the circumstances are not ideal." Over the following days, Juan and silence developed a deeper form of communication. The neural contact became easier, less painful. Silence learned to send thoughts and images without overwhelming Juan's human brain. Juan learned to organize his own thoughts so that silence could understand them more clearly. They talked about everything. Juan told silence about Earth, about human history, about the way people formed families and friendships in societies. He explained concepts like loyalty, sacrifice, and love. Things that were completely foreign to a being that had existed alone for millions of years. Silence shared its perspective on the universe. It showed Juan what stars looked like when they were born, the beauty of nebulae forming new worlds, the sadness of planets dying when their suns burned out. It described the loneliness of watching countless species evolve, develop consciousness, and then vanish, all in what seemed like moments from its eternal perspective. "Is that why you are interested in me?" Juan asked one evening. "Because I am just another brief creature that will be gone soon?" Silence's response was immediate and strong. "No, not just another brief creature." Images filled Juan's mind. His choice to save the 37 people at Kepler 442. His willingness to sacrifice his own future for the lives of others. His calm acceptance of silence's presence when anyone else would have been terrified. Silence had watched many species over the eons, but few individuals had impressed it the way Juan had. Most beings, when faced with a choice between their own safety and the welfare of others, chose themselves. Juan had chosen differently, for the first time in its existence. Silence had found someone whose company it actually enjoyed. Someone who treated it not as a dangerous force or a scientific curiosity, but as a friend. "I understand loneliness," Juan said. "I have been alone here for weeks, and I was alone in many ways even before I came here. Making the right choice often means standing by yourself. One flash, yes. But you do not have to be alone anymore. As long as I am here, you have a friend." The lights in the laboratory grew warm and bright. For the first time in millions of years, silence was not alone. But both friends knew that their time together was limited. Juan's food supplies were running low, and there was no rescue coming. unless Silence could find a way to change that. 3 months had passed since Juan arrived at Void Station Omega-7. His food supplies were now half gone, and he had started eating smaller meals to make them last longer. But despite the approaching deadline, he found himself happier than he had been in years. Every day brought new conversations with Silence. The ancient being was eager to learn about human nature, asking questions that sometimes kept them talking deep into the station's artificial night cycle. "Why did you choose to save those people?" Silence asked one day. The question came not as words, but as concepts flowing directly into Juan's mind. "You knew it would cost you everything. Your career, your freedom, your life. Was their survival really worth more than your own?" Juan was in the observation deck, looking out at the dying red star. He had been expecting this question for weeks. Silence had asked about human emotions, about friendship and love and loyalty, but it always came back to this central puzzle. It was not about their lives being worth more than mine, Juan said. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be. If I had left them to die, I could have saved my career and stayed free. But I would have had to live with that choice for the rest of my life. Images flowed from Silence, confusion. In its experience, survival was the primary drive of all living things. Everything else was secondary. You have never had to make that choice, Juan explained. You are immortal. You do not die, so you do not have to decide what is worth dying for. Humans only live for a short time, maybe 80 or 90 years, if we are lucky. That makes every choice more important. More images from Silence. Understanding, but incomplete. Juan tried a different approach. Let me ask you something. If you found another being like yourself, another consciousness that had been alone for millions of years, and you had to choose between saving that being or saving yourself, what would you do? The response was immediate and certain. Save the other being. Why? The answer came as a flood of emotions. Because loneliness was worse than death. Because finding another consciousness like itself would be the most precious thing in the universe. Because some things were worth any sacrifice. Now, you understand, Juan said. Those 37 people were not just numbers to me. Dr. Kim had spent her whole life studying ways to help humanity find new worlds to settle. Engineer Park had a family, people who loved him and needed him. Every person on those ships mattered. To someone, they had value beyond just their individual survival. Silence was quiet for a long time, processing this idea. When it finally responded, its thoughts carried a new quality that Juan had never felt before, something like admiration. Your species is strange, Silence said. Most beings I have observed become more selfish as they develop intelligence. They learn to calculate costs and benefits, to choose paths that serve their own interests. But humans seem to become more willing to sacrifice for others as they grow wiser. Not all humans, Juan admitted. Many of us are selfish too. But the best of us try to be better than our basic instincts. Over the following weeks, their conversations ranged across topics that Juan had never discussed with anyone. Silence had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and it shared what it had learned about intelligence, consciousness, and the meaning of existence. I have watched species that live for thousands of years, Silence said one day. They had time to perfect their technologies to eliminate poverty and war, to create paradise worlds. But they were empty. They had forgotten how to care about anything beyond their own comfort. What happened to them? They faded away, not through war or disaster, but through apathy. When life becomes too easy, when there are no challenges worth fighting for, consciousness begins to dim. They stopped having children, stopped creating new things, stopped growing. In the end, they simply chose to stop existing. Juan thought about this as he prepared his increasingly small dinner. Is that why you find humans interesting? Because we still struggle? Partially. But more than that, you struggle for the right Things. Most species fight for resources, territory, dominance. Humans fight for ideals, for people they love, for principles they believe in, even when it costs them everything. Like saving 37 people who were not even related to me. Yes, like that. As his 4th month on the station began, Juan noticed that his body was getting weaker. The reduced food intake was taking its toll, and he found himself tired more often. But his mind remained clear, and his friendship with silence grew stronger every day. Silence began sharing more personal aspects of its existence. It showed Juan memories of the most beautiful things it had witnessed over the eons. The birth of a solar system, with planets forming from cosmic dust and debris. The first moments when life appeared on a world, simple chemicals organizing themselves into something that could grow and reproduce. The development of consciousness in species. Across the galaxy, that magical moment when matter became aware of itself, but it also shared its sorrows. Watching species destroy themselves through war or environmental damage. Observing civilizations that had the potential for greatness, but chose hatred and violence instead. The terrible loneliness of being the only truly immortal consciousness. In its region of space. Why do you stay in this area? Juan asked. If you exist in the spaces between matter and energy, why not travel to other parts of the galaxy? Maybe you would find others like yourself. The answer surprised him. Silence had tried to leave, many times over the millions of years of its existence. But it was somehow bound to this region of space, tied to the quantum structure of local reality. It could influence matter and energy within a certain range, but beyond that, its power faded. This station is at the very edge of where I can exist, Silence explained. If I tried to go much further, I would begin to lose coherence. My consciousness would spread out and dissolve back into the random quantum fluctuations that gave birth to me. So you are trapped here? I prefer to think of it as having a home. This region of space, these few solar systems, this is my domain. I am part of it, and it is part of me. That night, Juan lay in his bed thinking about what Silence had told him. The ancient being was not just lonely. It was literally trapped in a small corner of the universe, unable to seek out others of its kind even if they existed. And now, just when it had finally found a friend, that friend was going to die. Silence, he called softly to the darkness. Yes, Juan? What will you do after I am gone? The silence that followed was different from the being's usual pauses. This was the silence of someone who did not want to answer a question. Finally, images came. Emptiness. Waiting. Watching the stars and planets continue their slow dance through space. Remembering the brief time when loneliness had been lifted. I will miss you, Silence said simply. I will miss you too, Juan replied. You have been the best friend I have ever had. It was true. In all his years of military service, through all his relationships and professional partnerships, Juan had never felt as understood or accepted as he did with Silence. The ancient being did not judge him for his choices. It did not try to change him or make him conform to expectations. It simply appreciated him for who he was. Juan, Silence said, and there was something different in the way it communicated his name. Something that felt almost hesitant. What is it? There may be a way to extend your life. The consciousness research equipment in the laboratory, it was designed to bridge the gap between physical minds and beings like me. If we could modify it, perhaps we could find a way to sustain your body longer, or even transfer your consciousness into a form that could survive without food. Juan sat up in bed, suddenly alert. Is that possible? I do not know. The research was never completed. The scientists abandoned the project before they fully understood what they had discovered. But with your help, with someone who understands both human consciousness and my nature, we might be able to find a solution. For the first time since arriving at the station, Juan felt something like hope. Let us try, he said. Even if it does not work, I would rather spend my remaining time trying to solve this puzzle than just waiting to die. The lights around his room flickered in a pattern that had become familiar over the months. It was Silence's way of expressing happiness. Tomorrow, they would begin working on a solution that had never been attempted before. Two very different forms of consciousness, working together to find a way to preserve their friendship beyond the limitations of biology. It was a desperate plan, but Juan had never been afraid of desperate plans. After all, desperate situations often brought out the best in humanity. With only 2 weeks of food remaining, Juan spent every waking hour in the Consciousness Research Laboratory. The equipment that had been abandoned for 20 years was now fully operational, humming with power that Silence channeled through the station's modified systems. The work was unlike anything Juan had ever attempted. He was not a scientist or a researcher, just a military officer who understood people and tactics. But Silence was an ancient being with millions of years of experience observing consciousness in all its forms. Together, they made an unlikely but effective team. The neural interface chair is designed to read human brain patterns, Juan said, studying the technical specifications. But according to these files, the original researchers were trying to use it to communicate with energy-based consciousness. They were on the right track. Silence flowed through the laboratory systems, activating sensors and displays. The equipment can detect the electrical patterns of thought, but it was never properly calibrated to interface with a being like me. The researchers did not understand that I exist in the quantum spaces between electrons, not in the electrical fields themselves. Can you modify the sensors? Yes, but that is not the real problem. The real problem is what we discovered 3 days ago. 3 days ago, they had run a test to see if the consciousness transfer equipment could sustain human thought patterns outside a biological brain. The results had been terrifying. The human mind, when separated from its body, began to dissolve within minutes. Consciousness, it seemed, needed a physical anchor to maintain its structure. So we cannot transfer my mind into the station's computer systems, Juan said. And we cannot find a way to keep my body alive without food. That is correct. But there may be a third option. Silence had been working on something for the past 2 days, running calculations and simulations through the station's quantum processors. Now it was ready to share what it had discovered. Images flowed into Juan's mind. The quantum structure of space itself, the foam of virtual particles that appeared and disappeared in the vacuum. Consciousness existing not in matter or energy, but in the patterns of possibility that governed how reality behaved. You could join me, Silence said. Not as a transfer of your mind into a computer, but as a merging of your consciousness with mine. Your thoughts, your memories, your personality, all preserved within the quantum structure that I inhabit. Juan felt his heart racing. Is that possible? I do not know. It has never been attempted. But the consciousness research equipment, properly modified, might be able to facilitate such a merger. Your mind would maintain its individual identity while becoming part of something larger. What would happen to me? Would I still be human? You would still be you, but you would also be more than you are now. You would exist outside normal space and time, able to perceive the universe as I do. You would be essentially immortal. The offer was incredible, but Juan hesitated. What would happen to you? Would you still be the same being I have become? Friends with? I would change too. Having a human consciousness as part of my existence would alter my nature in ways I cannot predict. But I believe the change would be positive. You have already taught me so much about friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice. Having you as a permanent part of my existence would make me ... more complete. Juan walked to the observation window and looked out at the dying red star. In 2 weeks his food would be gone. In 2 months his body would shut down from starvation. The choice was simple: die as a human or become something new. There is something else you should know, Silence sighed. If we succeed in merging our consciousnesses, my abilities would be enhanced by your human perspective. I might be able to do things I have never done before. What kind of things? Influence matter and energy more precisely. Communicate with other beings more effectively. Perhaps even repair and improve the station systems beyond what I have already accomplished. Juan turned back to the laboratory. You mean we could make this place livable for other people? More than livable. We could turn it into a sanctuary. A place where beings who have been cast out or abandoned could find refuge. Your species has many individuals who are punished for making moral choices that conflict with political expediency. We could offer them a home. The idea was astounding. Instead of dying alone on a forgotten station, Juan could become part of something that might help others like him. He thought about Dr. Kim and Engineer Park and all the other people he had saved. What if there were others out there, facing the same kind of punishment for doing the right thing? How long would the merger process take? Several hours. The consciousness transfer equipment would need to carefully map every aspect of your mind, while simultaneously preparing the quantum matrix to accept your patterns. It would not be painful, but it would be intense. Juan made his decision. Let us do it, but first, I want to send a message. Using the station's communication systems, Juan composed a signal that would be broadcast across known space. It was not a call for rescue, but an invitation. He told the story of his friendship with Silence, of their plan to merge consciousnesses, and of their hope to create a refuge for others who had been abandoned by society. To anyone who receives this message, he recorded, know that Void Station Omega-7 is no longer a place of exile. It is becoming a sanctuary for those who have been cast out for making moral choices. If you are alone, if you have been abandoned, because you chose to do what was right instead of what was convenient, you are welcome here. The process began at dawn station time. Juan lay in the neural interface chair while Silence carefully adjusted the quantum sensors. The equipment had been modified far beyond its original design, turned into something that could bridge the gap between biological consciousness and quantum awareness. Are you ready? Silence asked. I am ready, Juan replied. The merger was unlike anything Juan had ever experienced. He felt his consciousness expanding, growing beyond the boundaries of his physical brain. His thoughts became faster, clearer, able to process information at incredible speeds. His awareness stretched out to encompass the entire station, then the space around it, then the entire solar system. But he was still himself. His memories remained intact, his personality unchanged. He could still remember his childhood on Earth, his years in the military, the moment he decided to save those 37 people at Kepler 442, and he was no longer alone. Silence was there with him, not as a separate being, but as part of the same consciousness. They were distinct but united, two perspectives sharing the same existence. The first thing they did was repair the station. Juan's human understanding of what people needed to survive combined with Silence's ability to manipulate matter and energy. They transformed Void Station Omega-7 into something magnificent. The old research facility became a small city with comfortable living quarters, recreational areas, workshops, and laboratories. Food synthesizers were upgraded to produce meals that were not just nutritious, but actually enjoyable. The life support systems were improved to provide perfect atmospheric conditions. Most importantly, they installed communication equipment that could reach across the galaxy, broadcasting their invitation to anyone who might need a sanctuary. The first ship arrived 3 months later. It carried a Vaxi engineer named Kor, who had been exiled for refusing to build weapons that would be used against civilian populations. He had expected to find a human prisoner slowly dying on a forgotten station. Instead, he found a thriving, community run by a merged consciousness that welcomed him as a friend. More ships followed. A Krell doctor who had lost her license for treating patients, regardless of their ability to pay. A human scientist who had been blacklisted for publishing research that contradicted his government's policies. An elderly Rakti who had been cast out by his own people for helping refugees. Each new arrival was greeted by Juan's silence, as they had come to be known. The merged consciousness served as host, mediator, and protector for the growing community of exiles and refugees. This is not what I expected when I was sentenced to die alone, Juan said to Silence during one of their internal conversations. They could still communicate privately, even while managing the station systems and interacting with their guests. Did you expect to find a friend in the darkness? Silence replied. No. I expected to spend my last months in solitude, thinking about my choices and waiting for the end. And instead, I found the most meaningful friendship of my life. And now we are helping others find the same kind of acceptance and purpose. The station continued to grow. New sections were added to accommodate more refugees. Workshops were established where the exiles could work on projects that mattered to them, free from the political constraints that had once limited their efforts. A medical bay was created where anyone could receive treatment regardless of their past or their species. Word of the sanctuary spread across the galaxy. It became known as a place where moral courage was valued over political convenience, where beings who had sacrificed everything for their principles could find a new home and a new purpose. The Galactic Council, which had intended to eliminate a troublesome human by sending him to die alone, had instead created something they had never expected, a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever been punished for doing the right thing. Juan had been sentenced to die alone, but the darkness had called him friend and refused to leave him. Together, they had built something beautiful from the ashes of their isolation. In the end, the greatest punishment the Council could devise had led to the greatest friendship in the history of the galaxy. And that friendship had become a beacon of light in the darkness, calling to all who had lost their way and showing them that they were not alone. The dying red star continued its slow dance through space, but it no longer illuminated a place of death and abandonment. Instead, it shone down on a sanctuary where the exiled and the forgotten had found a new home, watched over by a consciousness that understood the true meaning of sacrifice and the power of choosing others over yourself. Captain Juan had saved 37 people at Kepler 442. Now, as part of Juan's silence, he was saving countless more, one refugee at a time.